Hello, world history students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for the Middle East Unit, Chapter 31, Section 3. And we're going to talk about nationalism in North Africa and the Middle East. In 1947, Great Britain announced that it was giving up control of the Palestine Mandate, and the United Nations proposed to partition Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. This has come in shortly after the Second World War and the discovery of the Holocaust. And so there was a lot of sentiment to do something that was right. And that's the reason why this is all coming about. So in 1948, Jewish leaders declared the birth of the state of Israel. As a result of the Holocaust during World War II, the world had a great sympathy for the Jews who had survived. And this led to the creation of that separate Jewish state. But as soon as the state is declared independent, when the proposed Arab state didn't come into existence, this led to an outbreak of the first Arab-Israeli war going back to 1948. And some 700,000 Palestine Arabs became refugees because some of the land that they had once held now was in the hands of the Israelis. The Suez Canal crisis erupted in Egypt when Egypt signed an arms deal with the nations of Czechoslovakia. The United States had refused to lend Egypt money to build the Aswan Dam, and the leader of the Egyptians, a man named General Nasser, eventually nationalized the Suez Canal, taking it away from the British. And for the most part, the British, the French, and the Israelis attacked Egypt. The United States was not involved in this attack, but obviously they were concerned. They had asked for the British, the French, and the Israelis to kind of tone it down. But needless to say, this probably was out of the growing sentiment that the Egyptians felt like they were missing out on some of the money that was being made, and that money was being funneled away to other nations. So this brings about something that is known as Pan-Arabism. Pan-Arabism is this belief in the unity of Arab nations. It's kind of a rallying cry. You know, we talked about nationalism, that pride, but to kind of stick together, you kind of need to have a little bit of unity, the power in numbers, if you want to call it that. Number 8, when Mohammad Reza Pahlavi became Shah, and you can see him there pictured below with President Eisenhower. This happened in 1941. British and Russian troops occupied parts of the nation of Iran during World War II. Part of that was concerned that the Germans were wanting to get petroleum out of this part of the world, and the fact that there was great concern about the Japanese who occupied territory to the east. If the British and the Russians could maintain this territory, they could keep the Axis powers out. Iranian nationalists were determined to take control of the country's oil reserves and reduce the power of the Shah. Nationalists were led by a man named Mohammad Mossadegh, who you see there down at the bottom of the page where I'm moving my cursor. He was an opponent of foreign influence in Iran, and he became kind of a target of the United States newly born CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. So in 1951, Mossadegh was eventually named Prime Minister of Iran, and he helped nationalize Iran's oil industry. The United States and Great Britain called for a boycott of Iranian oil and supported a coup that would eventually overthrow Mossadegh. This whole program of trying to stage an overthrow actually became known as Operation Ajax. And the United States and the CIA was involved in this. Anyway, the Shah eventually was able to come back to power, but he used the secret police to spy, intimidate, and torture his oppositions. And needless to say, there were a lot of people in Iran that did not like the Shah because he was kind of a bully. Needless to say, he was kind of allied with the Western powers. So there were times when the United States and Great Britain and France were aiding the Shah. But at the same time, the people of Iran who were living um, under some tyranny really did not like the Shah. And this is going to brew some problems that are going to kind of come to the surface in the 1970s. So the Shah's reforms um, made some Iranians think that Iran was moving away from the traditional Islamic values. And you start seeing a conservative Islamic movement that's going to start building in Iran, where many people are calling for kind of going back to the past. So, needless to say, we'll talk more about that in section 4.